everyone, and welcome to the Northern Outer Banks podcast, where we share the history, people, and places of this beautiful region of the North Carolina coast. I'm honored and privileged to be joined today by local historian Barbara Snowden. Barbara, I don't think there's anyone on the Northern Outer Banks in what we'll call the Northern Outer Banks, which is comprised of Currituck County. For context, that's the northern beaches up in Corolla, and then, of course, the mainland. And I don't think there's anyone on the Northern Outer Banks that knows its history better than you. So thank you for being here today. It's great to have you here in the studio.
Well, thank you for having me. I always love talking about the area.
Well, let's start just for the listeners who are tuned in today. Let's talk a little bit about you, how you ended up here on the Northern Outer Banks, and then your passion for its history.
Well, I've always loved history, and I tell people that my life is kind of like the state of North Carolina. I was born in the middle and raised there. I went away to school in the mountains, and then I got this little bug in my ear that I wanted to go see the coast because I had never seen it. So I started looking for a job and took a job teaching in Currituck. And that's how I ended up down there. My father said that was my one rebellion, is because I had been offered a job in Charlotte, which is where everybody wants to teach, and I turned it down to come out here because it was a place I'd never seen before.
What was that first time like for you? I mean, it's quite different than the large city that is
Yes.
Charlotte.
Well, one thing I liked being near the beach. I'd always gone to the beach in Myrtle Beach in South Carolina because it was closer to my home. But I liked the idea of being in the beach. And I also liked, once I got down here, I really liked the people and the friendliness. And it was more like a community, like living outside of Charlotte and Huntersville. It was more like I remembered Huntersville growing up before it got so big and so metropolitan. But,
So you were here long before what we would consider modern tourism, what we like to call our visitor economy here on the Northern Outer Banks. Walk us through that. What was it like when you arrived, and how has it evolved to where we are today?
One of the first things I've realized is the population was right around 5,000. And we used to play all the local schools going all the way down to Hatteras. I remember one basketball trip that we took to Hatteras, and it started raining, and we had to worry about whether 12 was going to wash out. And our bus driver, who was our auto mechanics teacher, said, "Okay, we're going through." We all sit there scared, are we going to make it through? And we did make it through because we really didn't want to spend the weekend in Hatteras. Well, I didn't want to spend the weekend in Hatteras with 10 cheerleaders and 20 male basketball players, to be honest.
No, I completely understand that. So that's the earlier days.
That's the earlier days. Well, let me tell you this story. I went to the library and I picked up Bill Sharp's book on the North Carolina. Bill Sharp was the guy who started our state's magazine, and he put out a book every so often that covered all 100 counties. And I looked up Currituck, and I read what it said. And it said, and I can quote because this is ingrained in my brain, that before Charlotte had its first building, and before white man knew the Smoky Mountain Range was there, Currituck was old and settled. And I remember in that library saying, "That's not so." And so I set out to prove it wrong. Well, I was wrong, because Currituck was old and settled before my ancestors made it to Charlotte or Mecklenburg County. And I'm not sure about the quote about before white men knew about the Smoky Mountain Range, because I didn't research that part of it. But Currituck was old and settled. And that's one of the things that I would like people who come here to visit to know, is that our history, we were first claimed by the Spanish. And that goes back to the 1400s and 1500s, the Spanish raiding this area. And we've been a settled community. We celebrate our 350th anniversary of this whole area, the Albemarle, the organization of the county. And so we've been around a long time, and you don't know that if you don't get off the main highway sometimes and look at some of the other things that are there.
And for context, 2026 will celebrate as a country the 250th anniversary, I think, of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And you said 350.
We were an organized government 350 years ago. We were settled in the early 1680s. 50 years, everybody goes to Williamsburg. When they had the trial of Blackbeard in Williamsburg, they subpoenaed a gentleman from Knott's Island, and he said, "I've been living here 50 years." And so that puts him back in they're talking the 1670s, 1680s, that the area was settled.
And just for context, I think our listeners know Blackbeard.
Oh, yes,
one of
that's
the
the
most notorious
pirate.
pirates. And then Knott's Island is part of the Currituck. I guess, would that be part of the Currituck mainland? It's an area that I don't think many of our guests are familiar with. It is
considered part of the mainland. Currituck, in terms of shape, is a very unusual place. It's about 40 miles long, and at the top it's about 30 miles wide, and then it goes down into a triangle, and then you cross over to what we would call Nag's Head, the Wright Memorial Bridge, and then you have the water going all the way up again to the Virginia line. When people ask me where I'm from, I say I'm from Currituck, the mainland part of Currituck, off the Outer Banks, and I said I'm as far to the northeast as you can go and not be in the ocean or be in Virginia.
Mm.
And so we're right in that little corner, and we have a lot in common with this whole northeastern area. And one of the things that I want people to know about us is our maritime history and the fact that when you're driving through Currituck, if you get off the road and turn either to your right or to your left, just go a few miles and you're going to run into water. You're going to run into the Sound. You're going to, both sounds, Currituck Sound and Albemarle Sound. In the northern part, you're going to run into the North River. And so water is very, very important to us and to how we developed. Roads came late. Roads, we're not talking about roads being paved to the 1920s. In fact, there was an early road that went from the courthouse over to Shawboro and then on over to Reading, which is the former name of Elizabeth City. And that road, it was the only road, and that map, the Moseley map, is a 1733 map. So I can say I had that one road, but that's the only road I had.
Because most of our visitors who come to the Northern Outer Banks come by way of the northeast area of the country, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio. They cross that Virginia line coming onto Highway 158 through Currituck, I think is 168. And that's the mainland.
Yeah, that's the mainland.
And we'll talk about that because that's where a lot of the agricultural history takes place, some of the maritime history. You're passing these beautiful produce farm stands on your way to the Wright Memorial Bridge. That's when most people feel like we are here on the Northern Outer Banks. Those two front tires hit that bridge, and you're surrounded by water. It's absolutely beautiful. But there's so much more to the history before you get to that bridge, right?
Yes.
And that's what we're talking about here. I mean, the origin of the name Currituck, Algonquin for land of the wild geese. So before modern tourism, visitors came for maritime, for hunting, for fishing, etc. So let's sort of capture that moment, if you will, in terms of the history of what the area looked like both on the mainland and then our northern beaches before what we would consider modern tourism, which started around the 70s and into the 80s.
Well, it would be very, very isolated compared to what we see now. And if you want to go back, our first tourist came here about the time of Christ. And that was our Native Americans, because the Algonquins came here for fishing and for hunting, and most of their camps were not permanent villages, but were tourist camps where they came down to do that. So people have been coming to Currituck for a long, long time. When I came here in 1968, as I said, we had right around 5,000. I did a study once looking at our population, and it took us we dropped right after the Civil War. Our population dropped to right around the 5,000, 6,000 mark. It took us all the way down to 1970s to get back up to where we were in population at the time of the Civil War. And then all of a sudden, we had an explosion. And we all know that explosion. Currituck it'd show up on census as one of the fastest growing counties in the nation. Now, that was percentage. If you start out at 5,000, when you get up to 10,000, that's the difference. When you get up to 15,000, that's the difference. 20, and right now we're at 22,000, I think it is, for the county. Somebody better check me on that, because I don't have any notes with me.
Well,
I'm talking off the top of my head. But so that was the gigantic boom of people moving in here. And that always also coincided with our growth in tourism, because once people saw it and once people realized the type of lifestyle you could have in Currituck, the water, the farm products, the land, people wanted to start moving here and making it as their home. So that was a major change. And I remember the fact that we had just one high school. We still only have one high school, but that high school has doubled in size. And now we have 2 middle schools and I think it's 6 elementary schools. So we're continuing that growth. But it was looking back at it, I go back to what I thought when I first came down here, is that I was moving to a community that was like what Mecklenburg had been 50 or 60 years before, in the fact that you had a community of people who worked together, who enjoyed doing things together, things like mullet roast. Most people have not heard of mullet roast, but that was one of the things I remember in the fall when the mullets started running. Families used to say, "Hey, come on out," and they put mullets on sticks and roasted them by the sound, and the whole community showed up. So that was again a community affair. I remember when Currituck celebrated their 300th anniversary. It's a very special time for me, because I came back from my honeymoon to make sure I got to the 200th anniversary of Currituck County. Wilson and I came back, I think, 3 days early so I could make the celebration. And I remember William Powell speaking in the gym, which was a packed gym of people. And he said, "Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. I'm sorry you're 2 years late." And I looked at him. And then I found out later that really 1668 was a much better date than 1670, which is what we had on our as our establishment date. And now some of the people are wanting to go back to 1665, which we have some documentation of a militia, courthouses, all of those things being built. So Currituck is ancient in terms of North Carolina history and in terms of United States history. But people who cross that Virginia line and only have their mind on the beach, and they see the beach and they see the beautiful beach and they love it, they miss that. All it would take is a little trip around. There's a little shortcut, a little circle that goes in front of the courthouse. That courthouse looks like just an ordinary courthouse, but there's a sign there that says the first courthouse was built in 1723 on exactly the same site.
Wow.
So they're standing where people in 1723 built a courthouse. Now, that courthouse is, I think, and this is just a guess, I think there was left of the original courthouse, if there is anything left, because there was a fire in 1804, is underneath that building that's standing there now. That building dates back to 1840.
Mm.
The jail dates to 1857. And it takes 5 minutes for them to get off 168, turn by the McDonald's, ride around the ferry dock to see that building. And you'll see one of the original county seats in the state of North Carolina, because the county of Albemarle was made up of 4 precincts: Currituck, Pasquotank, McQuimmons, and Chowan. And that is the beginning of North Carolina government.
Wow.
And they're looking at it, and they go by and don't realize what they have seen.
There's so many monumental landmarks in Currituck County, the Northern Outer Banks, the Jarvisburg Color School, the Wellhead Club is one that's familiar to a lot of our listeners. The Currituck Beach Lighthouse, we'll do an episode on that. What's one of your favorite historic landmarks along the Northern Outer Banks?
Well, I think the courthouse and jail, because that's what I've done a lot of work on. Wellhead, it seemed like an impossibility when we talked about and went to the commissioners and said we'd like to save that building, because it was a lot of money at that time. And the fact that the commissioners stepped up and provided the money to restore it, and you now have what I think is one of the most beautiful buildings in North Carolina. It's not as big as Biltmore, but it is the only Art Deco house in North Carolina that has been preserved and is historically restored correctly. And so it's just a beautiful building to go in there and look at and see it. I remember when I found out that the glassware was Tiffany. All those chandeliers and all those sconces. And I'd been handling them and dusting them, because before we restored it, we opened the building for people to see, and we did tours with volunteers. And, we dusted and we did things like, and I realized I'd been dusting glassware that was Tiffany. I'm afraid that I changed my methods very quickly on how you would do that. And again, why did Mr. Knight come down here?
I was going to ask, exactly. That's an interesting story.
Because of the history of hunting. A lot of people don't realize that there were a number of hunting clubs up and down the coast of Currituck that people have been coming and staying in because they wanted to go duck hunting, but also they wanted the enjoyment of being away from everything, the natural things, look out over the marsh, see the ducks come in. They can't, that is something that once you see these things, they stay in your mind. My husband, who was a duck hunter, made a statement, the night before he died, we were going to celebrate his 80th birthday, and my daughter was down, and she and Wilson were standing out, and he watched the sun set over Currituck Sound, and he looked at her and he said, "This is the most wonderful place in the world to live." And I keep repeating that, the most wonderful place in the world to live. And I know everybody loves their home, and they have places that they love. But if you give Currituck a chance, when you see the sunrise over the Sound or the sunset or over the marsh, it gets to you, and you think this is a beautiful place to be.
We are so fortunate to live here.
Yes.
In a place that most of our guests spend on average a week out of the year. They spend the rest of the year looking forward to that week. What is it about Currituck, the Northern Outer Banks, our beaches that draw people back year after year? A good friend of mine who visited a few years ago from California, he said it just gets in your bones. And I thought that's a great way to describe it. But for someone who has studied its history and understands the context of the region, what is it that's so special about this area?
I wish I could give you a good definition, but I can't. But it's that maritime feeling. The smell of the dew in the morning, the change in the marsh. We can tell right now that there was a little early fall this last week, and things just smell and look different. And I have a friend who is a photographer and has a whole notebook she takes pictures of sunrise and sunsets, and she has hundreds of them because it never gets old. And for her artist eye, she can see the difference in the clouds, the difference of the way the colors. And I wonder how many of those people who leave Currituck have that picture on their camera that they'll print out and remember what it felt like to be there, how much they enjoyed being there. Especially some of the people who go up north to Corova and the area where it is not as developed, where there's a maritime forest there. And if you've never walked in a maritime forest, you don't know what a forest is. It is a completely different experience.
Let's explain for listeners what we mean when we say maritime forest.
Okay, a maritime forest is trees. You don't think about trees growing on the beach, but they did. And as the water has moved and changed, some of those areas are still there where those trees, juniper, you've seen cypress knees, all of those things. They're not large trees, but they give the shade and the color of the area. In fact, most of our cemeteries on the Outer Banks were in those maritime forests. And so as a historian, I enjoy going up there and riding around and seeing if I can find some of those old cemeteries. But even on the mainland, I'd like, I don't know if I've said this before, but I'd like those people who leave the Virginia line and head down to Wright Memorial, I want them to take a turn to the left or to the right. There's a little teeny place called Hog Quarter that nobody's ever heard of. It's got a hunting lodge to the right that has been restored. It's got a boat dock on the water with some old boats, and the road just stops right there at the water. You don't know that hunting lodge was called Sawyer's Hunting Lodge, and it was the place that Grover Cleveland came to go hunting in Currituck County.
Wow.
And because he was president of the United States, he couldn't just go anywhere and stay, so he had to bring his boat down. And he got some criticism in the Norfolk paper because he did not bring his yacht to the Norfolk Naval Base, but he docked his yacht at Long Point, which is another little dot that nobody's ever heard of. But can you imagine the President of the United States pulling up to a dock in Long Point and having supper with the keeper? And that's what they did. And the daughter of the keeper played the piano for him that night as the entertainment. Then the next morning, he got up and went to Sawyer's Lodge and went hunting. So, those are little stories that most people have never ever heard about Currituck.
Well, even those who have visited the Wellhead Club aren't often familiar with equally famous visitors and hunters, and I think presidents, boxers,
boxers.
What's that story?
Well, there's a picture of, and we'll get this wrong, I think it's Dempsey, that he, in his hunting clothes, sitting on the steps of the Wellhead Club. And so I hope I have the right name correctly. But like I said, I don't have any notes with me.
That's okay.
But yeah, he came down and went hunting. Rockefeller, John J.P. Morgan, all these people who could go anywhere in the world. Guess where they went? They came to Currituck. Look at J.P. Knapp, Joseph Palmer Knapp. He was known for his golf and his fishing and his hunting. He started Metropolitan Life. He was a publisher of a magazine. Got on a ferry, the ferry in New York, fussing because he had had a lousy hunting experience. The guy on the boat with him said, "Oh, you should have been with me. I was in Currituck." They turned, got off the ferry, got back on the ferry, crossed back over, came down to Currituck. J.P. Knapp bought Mackay Island from Thomas Dixon, the author, built his house there, and lived the rest of his life in Currituck until he got ill and had to go back to New York. And what did he do? He met the people. He liked the people. He went hunting. He invited them to go and play golf with him. I have an interesting story that one of the local person kicked his ball, and Mr. Knapp got mad at him and sent him back home, said, "You're not coming back. You're going to play golf with me anymore." But anyway, Mr. Knapp spent over $5 million on education in Currituck County. That's why when those people are driving by and they see a nice brick building, it says J.P. Knapp Early College. That's why it's named after Mr. Knapp. And if they go to Mackay Island, they can see the wildlife. That is a national reserve there. They've got all of the birds, all of the grasses, all of the things they can drive through. Mr. Knapp, I was going to tell you, when he got here, he liked it so well that he spent his time here, including building an elementary school on Knott's Island. Knott's Island has a couple things that are interesting about it. One of them is that their kids come to by school by ferry. It's the only place in the state of North Carolina that has a ferry that brings students to school. By the way, on September the 20th, they will be celebrating the 100th anniversary of the elementary school that Mr. Knapp built for them on that island. So my word to the tourists who are coming through here and listening to this podcast is take a few minutes, get off the main highway, see what you can find on the mainland, see what you can find on the Outer Banks besides the beach. The beach is going to be there. That's going to be the number one draw. But there are other things that you can see, like the tour of Kerala, the church, the school, the Whalehead Club, some of the life-saving stations there, and ask the local people. They can tell you some of the pretty places. One of the questions you asked me in advance was if I was going to take somebody, where would I take them? Well, I'd take them up Tulls Creek on the morning and see a sunrise over that marsh and over that sound. I mean, that is one of the most beautiful sights you will ever see in your life.
Barbara Snowden, what a great conversation. Thank you for your history, for your perspective, for giving our guest a really good reason to slow down, to stop, to maybe take in some history that they didn't know about before today's conversation. Thank you for being with us. Thank you to each of you for tuning in today. I'm Miles Daniels, and we look forward to welcoming you back to the Northern Outer Banks podcast.
Thank you for having me.